his 4 years in charge at Arsenal, he's given 7 academy players their debuts, totaling only 16 appearances in all competition. Now, if you had those 3 last night, and he's got his reasons for it, of course he has, but those 3 are sitting there in the technical area. It's a dead rubber of a game, if there is such a thing. You guys would probably argue there's no such thing. It was 1-1, and they're already through. Would you not have said to one, if not all 3, come here, here's your chance?
Well, I think you could do, but I think you've also got other pros who probably haven't played many minutes, and there's always that little bit of pressure as a manager to go, OK, do I give a 16-year-old some game time, or do I put one of these players on that maybe haven't played for 2 or 3 games? So I think there's always that going through your mind as a manager. I think also, you know, there is an element of, and I know it won't feel like that, but there's also an element of, you know, that I know it's an experience you want to get on the pitch, but there's that experience of taking young players to be part and see what it's like in a big game, or in a game of that magnitude, or that quality rather, to go and feel what it's like in the dressing room. It might help them further down the line. So I think there's all sorts of different reasons for doing it.
Right.
I think the challenge for me is when you're at the top. And I know that's a different example, but when you're at the top of the Premier League, it's very difficult to put young players in and accept their inconsistencies, which is always going to happen when every point and every moment can mean the difference between winning and
I understand that, and I get what you're saying, Gary, but last night they're sitting there, and they're sitting there for a reason. They're stripped and ready to go on if required. So surely there was no better time.
Well, it'd been interesting if it had been, say, 2-0 down.
Context.
If it had been 2-0 down, because a lot of managers will do it, where, you know, you're 2-0 down, you know you may be going to get a little bit of criticism, and you go and chuck 3 young players on, so you can talk about the development of young players. It maybe takes away a little bit of the sort of pressure around the result. But yeah, look, it's so difficult to answer that, isn't it? Every manager's different. Some managers are brilliant at doing it and trust young players. Some managers you see, and at Arsenal at the moment that's an issue, but they don't seem. It doesn't really seem to matter. It's more about winning games, and it's more about trying to compete for the title.
I mean, it struck me, Danny, that I think in the case of young Nwaneri, Ethan Nwaneri, were you not critical of Arteta for blooding him last season? And now, after doing that, he hasn't played since. Did Danny say that? I think we've got that. Have a listen.
I'm not convinced it's the best move for a young player. I'm really not. He's obviously a super talent. I think it's probably trying to keep a young superstar happy a little bit, which is what managers do. I get that. But I would be more concerned with sometimes what that can do, because you can elevate a 15, 16, 17-year-old even at times to a position that becomes very difficult for them to cope with mentally, because they're already becoming a superstar. I'd imagine his Insta went up by about 300,000 in a day and things like this now. So although I'm pleased for him and his family, because it's a phenomenal record he's just broken, and hopefully he does go on to great things, I just think it could be something that Arteta maybe with hindsight wouldn't have done.
The kid was only 15, and in that particular game...
I was right, listening back.
Arsenal, you're congratulating yourself for being right. Arsenal were 3-0 up, and there was 2 minutes left of the game.
Just keeping him sweet.
I mean, do you honestly feel, from what you said earlier,
there's only 2 reasons.
Do you think you can elevate a kid too soon?
Yeah, I do. You've got to be really careful with the pathway you give. You know, what are your reasons for bringing a young players into a squad and a team? Normally it's to give them a taste of what's to come, because you see their talent, you think he's going to be part of this sooner rather than later. With a 15-year-old, you're dropping him into Arsenal's first team, and his Insta goes through the roof, and all of a sudden he's going back to school or college or whatever. You know, he's like around his mates, and all of a sudden he's like, whoa, what, are you really helping him?
I mean, Rooney was only 16. Moyes threw him on.
Yeah, you're talking about exceptions to the rule.
But he didn't know that at that time. Or did he? How do we know that this kid's not an exception to the rule?
Because he hasn't played since. Rooney got in and stayed in. McElhenney got in and stayed in.
We had a great example at Millwall when I was there, but we had a 15-year-old who'd been absolutely ripping up the academy games and she's got that real physicality, and we just felt, you know what, let's get him involved. Let's see where it goes. And part of that was the club obviously trying to create sort of that value and give him that opportunity. And we ended up playing, I think he made something like 5 or 6 appearances towards the end of the season. And the next season we felt, you know what, like 15, 16, what a brilliant opportunity. He could maybe play 15, 20 games. And there was that little plan for him. And he ended up leaving because we'd elevated it. Of course, as soon as you play a 15-year-old, every Premier League club comes to watch.
Where did he go?
He went to Rangers. So because of the compensation rules and everything, it was.
Is he still there?
I think he's still there. I think he's Zach Lovelace. He was. I think he's been in the first team a few times. So I'm not suggesting it was the wrong move for them, but the problem sometimes is, like Danny says, you can elevate that status quite quickly and actually cause a problem for the club. Like, I know at Arsenal it would be a very different problem, but you've got to be able to back that up, haven't you? If you do it and clubs do it, clubs manipulate it to create value.
Well,
managers manipulate it for different reasons,
Yeah.
to create kudos with the fans.
I think it should be for the right reasons, which is he's good enough to be around this.
Yeah.
And actually, in 6 to 12 months, he's going to be around it a hell of a lot more. So let's get him used to it.
Yeah.
That should be the whole, the real intention behind it. And I think generally it is.
Yeah.
But when you're plotting a 15-year-old into one of the biggest clubs in the country, I think you're creating a problem.
I think your point is right, Danny, as well, about Rooney or Michael Owen. You got to be very careful who the kid is. I remember going down the road to Millwall and seeing them play in Birmingham, and I thought, I've got to go for myself to have a look at this boy Bellingham.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I looked at it, I thought, oh, good God, what are we witnessing here? And he ran it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was a young player when I was there, sort of 13, 14, coming through, and used to bring him into the office. And all that was, again, it was a plan around we think he can get there. So, and that was a real commitment to that player. I mean, we had Damari Gray at Birmingham, the same, was 17. And you walked into the building, and Birmingham were in trouble at the time. You walked in, and he was so good in training, and he was so good impacting games coming on off the bench. You just kind of went, he has to play. There's like Danny says, there's very, very few young players. There's a lot of potential in a lot of young players.
Right.
There's very few that are almost at a point where you can't not play them. You can't leave them out, and that's probably the hallmark of why some of these players come into a team for 10 minutes and then don't get seen again, because they've got potential. Where some just come in and like Saka, comes in, stays in the team regardless of who they sign. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. When did a young Murphy break through?
16. But I started playing regularly at 17. But I did the same thing, off the bench a little bit, a few games, couple of goals here and there. But that was the middle of my first season when I left school. By the start of the next season, I was playing.
And were you elevated too quickly?
Yes, I went from YTS wages to £200 a week. I was elevated really too quickly.
I've made it.
Yeah.
I've made it.
And I had a Vauxhall Nova.
I had a Vauxhall Nova as well. I was 17.
Probably the same one.
I was elevated quickly. I came on after 25 minutes for Cambridge United, scored the winner, and then got brought off 20 minutes later. I was de-elevated just as quickly as I was elevated. Yeah, to teach me a lesson. Yeah, that was back in the days of slightly different management.
Only the really good ones break through even at that young age. Rooney, Owen, Bellingham, and the man Murphy.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.